Hello and welcome to Dark and Stormy Book Club. It's November's What We're Reading. Enjoy. I'm Ann Dart.
I'm Tracy Stormy.
And I'm Kathy Knight.
And together we are
It Was a Dark and Stormy Book Club,
a podcast for mystery lovers.
Welcome. If you enjoy our show, please consider contributing to the Dark and Stormy Patreon. By becoming a patron, you will help us create better and quality content. There are also benefits to becoming a patron, such as exclusive content and Dark and Stormy merchandise. Become a supporter at patreon.com/darkandstormybc. Check our website for the link. We appreciate any and all contributions. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Dark and Stormy Book Club. It's November, what we're reading. And this month, because of Thanksgiving, we decided we will do mysteries set in Colonial America. So, welcome.
How are you ladies? This is one of the first times we've been together since Fright Reads.
I know.
Yes, it is.
I am doing fabulous.
Okay, would you like to go first?
Sure. I picked one a little bit in the series. So I read The Shaker Murders, which is book 6 of this series. This is by Eleanor Kuhns. It is called a Will Rees, which is Rees mystery book. And like I said, this is the 6th one. So I'm going to read you the little blurby thing. A peaceful Shaker community is rocked by a series of bizarre accidents. But is there more to them than first appears? Fresh from facing allegations of witchcraft and murder, traveling weaver Will Rees, his heavily pregnant wife Lydia, and 6 adopted children take refuge in Zion, a Shaker community in rural Maine. Shortly after their arrival, screams in the night reveal a drowned body. But is it murder or an unfortunate accident? The Shaker elders argue it was just an accident, but Rees believes otherwise. As Will investigates further, more deaths follow and a young girl vanishes from the community. Haunted by nightmares for his family's safety, Rees must rush to uncover the truth before the dreams can become reality and more lives are lost. Yet can the Shaker elders be trusted, or is an outsider involved? Now, I am going to start off by saying this is so not something I would have read on my own.
Oh, really?
Nope. It's a historical time period where I am not necessarily interested because I really like Regencies. It's religious, which I don't tend to read. And it's also set, like if I were to read this like a colonial, normally I would have chosen like a witchy kind of thing. Let me just say, I could not put this thing down.
I told you to get you out of your comfort zone.
Yes. So I'm going to say really quick, and this is so completely honest. I really enjoy doing these with you guys because it does make me go outside. It makes me read things that maybe I wouldn't have read, but I'm like, oh, now that's one of the reasons that I love the newsletter that we put together too, because it introduces me to books. Look, there are millions of books now. It is really hard to find, especially because the Amazon loves to only send you recommendations based on things that you've already read. And so if you are not a Shaker reader, if you do not tend to look up colonial things, this is never going to show up in your algorithm list. Right. So I love that we do both the podcast of the What Are We Reading and then also the newsletter, because it opens me up. Like I read a couple of the things from the newsletter and I was like, oh my word, I would have never read this, but I am absolutely fascinated. If I don't write as much, I just want to send it out to the listeners. It is these two ladies' fault. So I'm just saying, if my books are not coming out fast enough, you let Tracy and Ann know that it's their fault.
I'm willing to take it.
Okay.
I am
right,
too.
good.
I've read all the books in this series.
Have you? Okay.
And I read them in order. I found the first book in this series, and I think it was called a Simple Murder. Or
yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I read
the
that.
first one.
And I thought, oh, that looks different. I was sold.
I'm just fascinated with the whole Shaker because I think people get them confused with the Amish. And they are
Yeah.
as far from the Amish as you could possibly be.
Well, this
Yes.
book, it goes into the Shaker beliefs, but I don't think it's preachy.
No,
It's not.
I don't think so either. Did
But I
you
wasn't
know?
sure.
I just looked it up that there is still a few Shaker communities only
Interesting.
in Maine.
All right.
Because they
Interesting.
get new members that join, no sex. So
Yes.
they're
I
going to
saw
die
that.
out.
I found that fascinating because the first couple of chapters are kind of like introducing things. Look, I won't lie. I'm going to tell you, if you're going to start this series, I would start at book 1. I feel like if I had started at book 1, I would have understood a little more about the community. I'm coming in at book 6. So you've got 5 where I could have known more about things and then moved more smoothly into book 6. I do think you can read it as a standalone because there's not a ton that has to do with the first 5 books, but much like a most series, if you start at the beginning, you're just going to get more inside information.
You're going to get
will,
your character
yeah,
developed.
First, I think 3 books, he's just courting her,
oh, okay.
and they don't want him to court her because she's in the Shaker community.
Right,
And she has dedicated her life to being a Shaker.
right.
Well, he shakes something.
And then she's pregnant, so there's more than
Right.
seconds.
So
Yeah.
it's a great series.
Yeah, well, so when people read like Tally or when they read Wit and Whiskers, they'll ask, can I read these out of order? And the answer is yes, you could. However, I always put the caveat on of they'll be funnier if you start at the beginning because then you get all the inside jokes. You understand if
With
she
Grandma.
references exactly. So you may enjoy book 3 alone, but I think you would enjoy book 3 more if you started with 1 and 2. But this book really grabbed me. The writing is the word that I want to use is accessible. So sometimes when you're reading a more historical story, the wording that they use can be historically accurate, but it can also make you kind of stutter and stumble. She did not do that at all. And for things that I didn't know what they were from the beginning, I was able to infer through the sentence, the rest of the sentence, I could get what she was talking about. It's fascinating. The whole Shaker community in general, and that they don't procreate, that there were winter Shakers. That was very interesting too, that people would come in because they would be guaranteed 3 meals a day, a warm bed, and something to do. And they would stay for the winter months because it was Maine, it's snowing, you're out of luck, and then they would leave, but you had to stay within the rules. And
they made great furniture.
Yes.
Yes, they did.
But so the very first murder, which happens within the second chapter, so I'm not spoiling anything for you, they find a dead person that Will is actually rooming with in the tub. And the night before, there had been words exchanged, and he was not very nice to Will. And Will is just, from the story itself, it looked like he was just coming off of some real tragedies. He had moved his family to the Shaker community to keep them safe. And now all of a sudden, everything is shaken up. I really liked how methodic he was, too. It was like he wasn't running around like a chicken with his head cut off, trying to I must figure out this. It was more like, I need to investigate this more.
When you say things like that, I try to think about the fact that back then they had no distractions. There were no phones. I think it was easier.
Yes.
And, they could really focus on what their task is. And his task was trying to figure out who murdered this man.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and also that he picked up clues because the world is capitalized in this book because it means anyone who is not in the Shaker community. And it was very interesting to see what the Shaker community thought of the world, but through Will's eyes. And so there's this slight distance, but not a full gap. It wasn't the Shaker world from the inspector's eyes or the cop, or I don't remember what they called him in it. Sorry.
The ward.
Yeah, there you go. It wasn't from a complete outsider's position. I really liked that the person that she chose was adjacent to the community, not a complete outsider, but not necessarily a complete insider either. It was fascinating. It was fascinating.
Let me ask you this, and this is not off topic, but
No,
just
you're fine.
out of curiosity.
Yeah.
So when you read something like this as a
Yes.
writer, do you have these like epiphany moments where you're like, oh, I wish I would have thought of that?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Or think, ooh, I see what you did there. Wow, that might be something
Or
that I want to.
wording, the way they put their words together. I have this little bank in my head of clever things that writers write. When I read something like that, I read it about 4 times because I'm just so fascinated with how they put the same 26 letters together to
Yeah.
form this beautiful thing.
So that, however, depends. I am not a lyrical writer. There are authors, Sarah Allen Addison, I want to say is her name. She does more women's fiction. She is a lyrical author. Once you're in there, that book sounds like a song to me. The way that she constructs her sentences, the words that she chooses. I am never going to be that person. I am much more of a snarky hit and run kind of writer.
Yeah.
And that's fine. That doesn't mean that I can't ever be lyrical. It means that I don't look at those books in quite the same way. The other writers who write more like me, I absolutely will be like, oh, but it's more like could I do that versus I need to make sure that I do that. And I doesn't necessarily bank in my head as opposed to just becomes another tool in my toolbox. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
It's a little less like I want to make sure I do that, and more like I wonder if Tally would do something like that. Maybe not, but sometimes I have an epiphany and I think Tally might not do that exactly. However, she would maybe do this instead that's like parallel. And so, yeah, so absolutely.
Interesting.
And I do try to read for enjoyment because sometimes as a writer, you will get caught up in the tricks of what is in the book and you're reading it more as an editor or a critiquer than you are as just enjoyment. And so sometimes that's why I love books that I wouldn't normally read simply because they have nothing that I would take from them. You know what I mean?
So you can enjoy it.
Yes. And that's one of the reasons that I read Regencies. Well, although now I'm writing kind of a Regency / Victorian. But even if I wasn't, this is not something that I'm like, oh, I didn't realize that the Shakers did that. Maybe I could put that in there somewhere.
It's out of your wheelhouse.
It is. Yeah. It is. That's one of the reasons when I do book signings, I will ask people, what do you read? And if it's not what I write, I'll be like, okay, well, what kind of recommendations can I give you? That guy down there does exactly what you're looking for. Because really, I want you to enjoy whatever you're reading. The
community should do that with each other.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But yeah, this was great. So thank you very much for the recommendation. I highly, highly recommend, even though that's using the same word in a sentence, and I don't like that close together. But I want you to go out and
she's editing herself.
I am. So I'm going to recommend that you do what I'm going to do, which is go back and start with book 1. If you're not in the series already, like I was not, I already bought book 1. I am going to be reading that because I just can't not. I am intrigued by book 6 enough to go back and really see, who is he at the beginning and who does he become along the way.
It's like, I think it's like 1777, something like that.
Yes. And then the author at the back will kind of discuss a couple of the concepts that she brought in, like she was discussing the Shakers and money in general, land and property taxes, and that kind of thing. So, and there's diversity in there too, which I was a little surprised to see that because they do have a former slave within their community. And so I was like, oh, okay, we went all in on this one. And it really was. It was very good. I was prepared to read it because it made sense for the scene. I ended up being sucked into it because it was a really good book.
Yep.
Very good.
It is. I'm going to go next. It has a terrible title, but it's called Brutalized.
Oh,
It's by J.R. Thompson. It's self-published, and it came out in July of 22. It starts out in Dublin, Ireland. I never knew, I think I had heard about it, but it never registered, that there were a lot of what they called white slaves brought over from Ireland to be indentured servants on the plantations, just like the blacks were. And this is the story of a boy named Callum McCarthy. He's 12 years old.
oh,
And he lives in Dublin with all his brothers and sisters. Good Catholic family, so you know there's 7 or 8 of them. And he had a poor Irish father. He was just kind of a wastrel, and his mother was just worn out. He's asleep in bed one night, and all of a sudden he's yanked out of his bed, thrown in a box with all his brothers and sisters
oh,
into a cage, and they're put on the cart and off they go.
oh my gosh.
He doesn't know if his parents are alive or dead. When he gets to the port in Dublin, they load him on a boat going to America. It takes, I think it said 7 weeks to cross the Atlantic, and very little food. And of course, they're all chained together. Just once a week, they get on deck and they get water splashed on them. That's their bath. When he gets to America, he's lined up with all these others, and these wealthy people come and look, check his teeth, walk along, say, he's too skinny, he's too this, and he's too that. Well, he is picked by a man named Josiah Gilchrist, and he takes him to his tobacco plantation where he's going to live. Well, he finds out very quickly this man, he talks to him like he understands what his situation is. He finds out when he gets to the plantation, he bought him as a present for his 17-year-old son, who is Mr. Lord of the plantation. And he's going to make Callum rue the day he came here. He's looking any excuse to punish him, to beat him, to starve him. The wife of the man who originally bought him, she cooks for the slaves and she helps as much as she can, but she can't go against her husband, and she adores her son. So they just sort of let this cruelty.
Is this a mystery?
Yes, it's a mystery.
Oh, okay.
The son would come out and say, all right, you've got 10 minutes to chop and load that wagon filled with firewood, or I'm going to beat you. I mean, just stupid, terrible things. He's not the only slave on this plantation. There's several, what they call white slaves. And they use
Is that what they would call them back then?
Well, they use another term, which we cannot.
Okay. Nope. Understandable.
Yep. He finds out that there's a grove over behind the plantation that has 7 big mounds on it. And he says, those look like graves.
Oh, geez.
So one night he steals a shovel and he sneaks out and he starts digging. And there's a human foot in this grave. Well, he's discovered, and of course he's beaten in parts. It's very hard to read. He finds out that this family had 7 children. Now there's 1. What happened to those children?
Put 2 and 2 together.
And who are the people in the graves? He's not going to take no for an answer, and he looks into it. Now, he's only 12 years old, so he hasn't got a lot of power. But this book ends. It has a cliffhanger.
Is it a series?
There's one more book, And that book is called Infuriated. Apparently, this was a regular business deal. There were people over in Ireland that would agree to work for a plantation for X number of years if they paid their passage to come over. They got over and they were slaves, just like this boy. He just wasn't given the choice.
Well, and even with indentured servants, if you look into the history of it, yes, there was a specific amount supposedly for their passage, but a lot of times the landowners would realize that they were getting close to that and they'd start charging them for housing and food and clothes to build their debt back up so that there was no way they were ever actually leaving.
Well, also, this one, all of a sudden, everything you did was wrong. So, 6 more months on your indentured servant, and you spilled the gravy at lunchtime another year, and they had no recourse. There was nobody they could go to and say, this is wrong. So it was based on true things that happened. I'm sorry to say, any slavery is wrong, but this was just hard to read in parts, but it was a very good book.
Okay, my book is called The Bone Rattler. It's not The Bone Rattler, it's Bone Rattler. Because when I was looking up information, there is a book called The Bone Rattler, and it had nothing to do with what I was reading. It's by Elliot Pattison. It is number 1 in the Duncan McCullum series, and it's put out by Counterpoint. There are 7 books so far in this series. This came out in 2007, but I need to start at the beginning, and I'm really glad I did. This one takes place during the French Indian War. He's sailing over from Scotland to the New World. He's the only man aboard the ship that has any medical training. And all of a sudden, there's a series of murders and seeming suicides. So like some people are just in the water, let's say. And Duncan is ordered to assemble evidence to hold another prisoner accountable for their deaths or face punishment that means his own death. His conclusion suggests that a wave of violence is somehow linked to the savages of the American wilderness. Duncan's suspicion that a prisoner company is to be sacrificed in the war seems to be confirmed when he learns that they are indentured to Lord Ramsay's estate in the uncharted New York woodlands, a heart of darkness where multiple warring factions are engaged in physical, psychological, and spiritual battle. This book was almost 500 pages long.
Woo!
It almost took me the whole month to read it because I had other things I needed to read. Duncan McCullum is the protagonist, and he's a very compelling and relatable character. A man of intrigue and intelligence, forced to adapt to a new, harsh environment. His journey of self-discovery and interaction with the diverse inhabitants of the new world is the heart of the story. And it's so true because he is dealing with coming to this new world. It's overwhelming. Then he's being forced to solve a crime that really he not that thrilled about. And then he's meeting Indians. It's just, it was fascinating. And just like you, Misty, this is not a time period that I would normally go for. Pattison's writing is both captivating and informative, bringing to life the sights, sounds, and smells of the 18th century wilderness. The descriptions of the landscapes, the Native American culture, and the battles are vivid and engaging, transporting readers to the heart of the action. I am so happy I read the first one because this follows history. So I just went and peeked at what the 7th book, which comes out October 24th. This episode won't come out until November. It is starting to dabble into the Civil War. So I love the fact that it's following history. And I will definitely, even at 500 pages apiece, it'll take me a while, but I am definitely going to go back and read all these.
That's
Very
awesome.
good.
New book is called Freedom's Ghost, and it's also put out by Counterpoint. That's not a publisher I'm familiar with. I don't know if that's a self-published. Elliot Pattison has a website at elliottpattison.com.
Very good.
Very cool. Counterpoint Press, if that
Maybe
is-
that's what it is.
okay. So author-driven publishing house. So it sounds
Yes.
like it's not necessarily self-publishing, but it wouldn't be like one of the big
houses.
publishers. It would be a smaller one, but they have quite a few award-winning books, and it's 3 different presses together that was started in 2007. So yeah.
That's right, when he wrote this book.
Yep. And then the books are actually distributed by Penguin Random House.
Oh, okay.
Oh, that's
All right.
So
We've
So
heard
what-
of that one.
yeah. So what that means, if anyone is interested, is that they're a smaller house, but they have contracted with Penguin to be able to push these out through Ingram's, which then allows them to be displayed in Barnes and Noble, Walmart, that kind of thing. So Kensington does the same thing. Kensington has their own, but then they also have the paperbacks come out through Random.
Oh, interesting.
Very good.
Yep.
Trivia. Last week's question was, author Charlotte McLeod had a family connection to which criminal? A. Whitey Bulger, B. John Gotti, C. Al Capone, or D. Albert Anastasia? The answer is A. Whitey Bulger. In real life, Charlotte McLeod had a close family connection to the notorious Boston mobster James Joseph Whitey Bulger, leader in the 70s and 80s of the Winter Hill Gang, a confederation of Boston area organized crime figures of mostly Irish and Italian descent. The late Bulger, a one-time mob informant, who at the time of his demise in 2018, at age 89, was serving consecutive life sentences for the slayings of 11 people, which he committed while informing to the FBI. He was savagely beaten to death in prison. It was a violent end to a violent life. This week's question is, John Dickinson Carr is famous for writing what? A. The most reissued mysteries. B. Mysteries with hints given throughout the story. C. Impossible mysteries or locked door mysteries. D. First-person mysteries. Tune in next week for the answer.
Well, that gives you 3 new books to choose from.
Yes.
We hope that if you are a historical mystery reader, that you pick up at least one or all of them.
Even
They are
if you're
all
not,
well
please.
worth it. Yeah,
take a-
get out
go
of your
take a
get
chance.
out that comfort
Get out
zone.
of your comfort
Exactly.
zone. Yeah.
You get under your comforter with your comfort cup of tea, and then you read outside of your comfort zone. That's my challenge to you.
Because
Let me
it's
know how you
getting
do.
cold out there. You need to snuggle up with a
Yeah.
good book.
Yes.
All right,
absolutely.
ladies, let's say goodbye.
Oh.
But I will see you on the next episode, and everybody keep warm.
Yeah.
And remember,
Life would be boring without a little mystery.
bye.
Bye.